Hi there, and welcome to the 60th OctoPrint on Air. I'm your host, as always, Gina Heuske, and welcome. Yeah, so it's been a while since we did one of these, as usual. A bit over a month, actually, and I wanted to do this earlier, but then some things in real life happened that had forced me to postpone things. I was ill for a while, and so that everything was shifted by a week or two due to that. And yeah, but now here we are. I finally got around to doing that. And yeah, as usual, we will be talking today about what I've been up to and what the next steps are. And I guess we just should get right into it. And I sincerely hope that you cannot hear the church bells tolling outside that just started when I hit record. But I'm going to ignore that now, and I'm just going to continue in the hopes that if you can hear it, it's not too loud, at least I hope. Okay, so what I have been up to. So the most prominent thing that you probably all noticed, or at least that I hope so, is that I released the 1.10.3 bug fix release last week. When I'm recording this on November 14th, it is last week. When I'm releasing this to the public, it will be 2 weeks ago. So released on November 5th, and that fixed two moderate security vulnerabilities that I got reported since the release of 1.10.2, and also fixed some minor potential security issues that could become a problem down the road. At this point, I just want to express big kudos to Jacopo Tediosi, who for now has pretty much done an audit on the whole code base, I think, and helped discover quite a bunch of problems that I overlooked, and everyone else as well. So OctoPrint certainly is safer than ever before thanks to him. So please, a round of applause here. And one of the vulnerabilities that got fixed in 1.10.3 was actually a cross-site scripting problem, and that basically is going to trigger a bit of a behavior change in future versions of OctoPrint. So the thing is that so far the template system that I use in OctoPrint, called Ginger, for rendering the pages and all of that, wasn't set to auto escape included HTML. And normally that is not a problem unless the HTML code or whatever is getting included into the template is something that comes from outside, comes from a potential user, comes via an HTTP header or whatever. So anything that is not fully under control of the app should usually be escaped. And I did a pretty good job, in my humble opinion, of doing that, but in some places I forgot. And this is one of these cases here that we saw here that got fixed now in 1.10.3. And because it is fairly easy to overlook situations like that, I've decided to now go with auto escape enabled on the templating system going forward in 1.11.0 and future OctoPrint versions. And for now, that will be limited to the core code, so the core templates of OctoPrint itself, plus any bundled plugins. And third-party plugins will be exempt by default, because the problem is that I have no idea about the various template implementations or templating approaches that third-party plugins are running out there, and I do not want to accidentally nuke them and break their functionality by forcing auto escape on for them. But what I have already implemented is that with 1.11.0, plugin authors will be able to opt into having their plugins also be auto-escaped or be part of the auto-escaping mechanism. And so all they will have to do is basically implement an additional method in their template mix-in implementation, template plugin mix-in implementation, and set return true there. With OctoPrint 1.13, so we are now going towards 1.11, then there will also be a 1.12 and then a 1.13. And in OctoPrint 1.13, I will switch this behavior. So in OctoPrint 1.13 and going forward, auto escaping by default will be enabled for everything, including third-party plugins. But third-party plugins will still be able to opt out of this. Though, of course, this is highly discouraged because security issues and such. So the idea here is to basically have a kind of soft rollout of auto-escaping in OctoPrint's templating system, giving plugin authors enough time to test their plugins, whether they actually work as expected with enabled auto-escaping, which most of them probably will, and allowing them to fix things if they aren't, and also switching auto-escaping on right away if there is no problem with doing that. By basically enforcing this with 1.13 going forward, the overall security of the whole platform will improve by greatly reducing the cross-site scripting attack surface, or at least that is the idea. Now, from my personal experience, after having enabled auto-escaping for all of OctoPrint's core, plus all of the bundled plugins, even those that are on an external release cycle, I am quite happy to say that probably for most plugins, there will be no effect at all for them by that. So, or rather, they will not be affected by this behavior change. The only places where I actually had to touch up things and actually had to change things were some locations where I included HTML in some translated strings. So, for example, where I wanted to emphasize a certain word in a translation string and thus put a strong tag on that. So I had to work around that in some bits. And also some situations where I had to include some actual prepared or actually rendered HTML inside a template for a bundle plugin where I wanted to include some raw SVG files. And there is a solution for that. You can tell the templating system that something that you are including is safe to include as is. And everything else just will be auto-escaped. And there's also some options that you can do by using placeholders and such. And but all in all, I really don't expect that big of an impact by this for third-party plugins. I still wanted to err on the side of caution here and not enforce this functionality right away. In any case, I also made it so that when OctoPrint 1.11 is loading a third-party plugin that is a template plugin and has not explicitly opted in or opted out, so basically just left the default behavior, which currently is being opted out, OctoPrint will log this in the OctoPrint log, and that will also link to an FAQ entry. And that is already prepared. You're seeing it here in the knowledge base. How do I improve my plugin security by enabling auto escape? And that now explains what is auto escaping actually supposed to do, why this is opt-in for now, how do I opt in, and when it later becomes auto opt-in for everyone, how do I opt out again? Though this is hidden behind this disclaimer, this is a security risk. And I also included a link to the template designer documentation in the Ginger docs, because this is also all explained therein. So I'm not using any fancy self-implemented stuff here primarily, but rather using Ginger's built-in escaping functionality. And yeah, this explains how to do all of that. So that will hopefully explain everything that you need to know. Okay, right. So what I would like to ask of all of you plugin authors out there who are seeing this, which I hope are all of you, is that once the first release candidate of 1.11.0 goes out, that you please see what happens if you switch your plugin to opt into auto escaping and check it through and look if everything looks wonky and everything works and such. Because if everything just works fine, leave it enabled, push out a new release, and be safer all around already. Yeah. Okay. What else did I do? So I'm also spending a lot of time currently working towards 1.11.0, for example, with the auto-escaping. But the last few days I actually spent on making OctoPrint compatible to Python 3.13. That was released a couple of weeks ago. And obviously it makes sense to make sure that OctoPrint's next version is actually flagged in as compatible to that, and not only flagged in, but actually compatible to that. And it turns out that, OctoPrint itself worked pretty much out of the box. The problem was that I was getting slammed with a ton of deprecation warnings all of a sudden. Most of them actually from code in third-party dependencies. And so once more, I ran into issues due to still having to support the now end-of-life Python 3.7 and also Python 3.8 now, because plenty of these dependencies had new versions out there that got rid of these deprecation warnings, but weren't compatible to Python 3.7 and Python 3.8 anymore. So now OctoPrint 1.11 will actually depend on different versions depending on what Python version you're running on, and in way more places than before. And yeah, that is something that gives me some stomach pain, to be honest, because that of course makes debugging a bit trickier. But yeah, I hope that it will not cause many problems. In the end, anyhow, that solved it and I won. I also had to fix some deprecation problems within OctoPrint's codebase itself, and I even had one that basically had me completely refactor the whole server startup code, which was a lot of moved lines and re-implemented logic. But everything works now from Python 3.7 up through Python 3.13. And I think that is a good result, all in all. What I can tell you definitely, though, is that 1.11 is absolutely surely going to be the final version of OctoPrint that supports both Python 3.7 and Python 3.8, because the amount of maintenance overhead that having to support these now end-of-life versions is just getting ridiculous. So and quite painful. And this amount of pain is also why, as you might remember, I implemented a health check plugin that will ship with OctoPrint 1.11.0 and which will tell you if you are running OctoPrint under a Python version that is end of life now. And speaking of that, just telling you that something is end of life obviously won't help you, but you will have to update the underlying Python. And the problem is that OctoPrint cannot do that for you, because that is like trying to wash or trying to pull the rug that you're standing on. So as I said last time, I looked into options on how to make this a bit more automated and how to help you with some tooling support to do that. So I actually did that. So the thing is that in principle, upgrading OctoPrint to a new Python version isn't that problematic, because it supports everything from Python 3.7 to Python 3.13. So everything that is currently out is at even 2 end-of-life versions is supported. So there's no problem there. And all of OctoPrint settings and data files and such are not stored in the Python virtual environment, but rather outside of it. The problem so far were the plugins that you also have installed with OctoPrint, because those get installed into the virtual environment. So just swapping to another or switching the virtual environment out would mean you lost your plugins, and that obviously was a bit of an annoying problem. And then you would have to first run a backup and then restore and such. And it turns out I actually was able to detect the plugins in the virtual environment and created a little tool that you can run against the virtual environment directory that will create a list of all the plugins that you have installed, then replace the virtual environment with a new one built from a new Python version or whatever you told it to build it from. Install OctoPrint, install all of its dependencies, and then also reinstall all of the plugins that it previously created a backup of. And I wanted to quickly show you that. So this is the tool that I'm talking about, the OctoPrint VEnv tool, so the OctoPrint Virtual Environment tool, a tool to help with various tasks surrounding OctoPrint VEnvs. And it's an easy install. It has some subcommands: export plugins, install plugins, create a VEnv, and recreate VEnv. And this recreate VEnv thing here, this is going to help you with upgrading to a new Python version as well. So how this works is basically here's a quick video of how this works. You tell it to recreate the virtual environment with a Python version you tell it to. So for example, here I have a virtual environment called testenv, which I think in this demonstration was on Python 3.7. And I'm telling it to recreate this with using this Python 3.12 that is installed there. So this is just the Python binary that I'm pointing it towards there. And then it starts working. So it first creates a plugin export in a temporary file. It creates a backup of the existing virtual environment. Then it creates a new virtual environment using the provided Python. It also tells you what version it is going to use there. Then it installs pip in there, the wheel package, and also OctoPrint itself. And that takes a bit. And once it's done with that, it will then go through the plugin export that it created up here and install all of the plugins in there into the virtual environment as well. And once it has done that, the recreation of the virtual environment is done. And if you were now going to fire up this OctoPrint server at the exact same location as before, it would be running under Python 3.12 instead of Python 3.7 or whatever that was before. And what this can obviously do is help you upgrade a Python environment, a virtual environment. What it also can do, and that is also something that I explain here in common workflows, is not only migrate a VEnv to a newer Python version, but during our so on the forums and on the Discord, we have seen repeated situations where for some reason people had problems because the virtual environment got corrupted. For example, because some file system corruption happened, or God knows what. Anyhow, what you can now do with this tool is solve this as well, because the thing is that the virtual environment does not have to be functional anymore. OctoPrint does not need to be able to run anymore in order to create this plugin export. So even if the virtual environment is completely shot to bits, the VEnv tool will be able to extract a list of plugins, at least if not the plugin files themselves are completely corrupted. The metadata of the plugins, I should add. Extract a list, create this list, and then just create the virtual environment from scratch and install the plugins from the plugin repository again. And of course, you can also export a list of plugins installed into the VEnv. The format is the same that the plugin manager inside OctoPrint also accepts. So in theory, you could go to one instance, extract the plugin list, go to another instance, and just install everything through the plugin manager with the export you generated. And of course, you can also just create a fresh virtual environment with OctoPrint pre-installed and everything, even with a list of plugins. So all of that together makes this work. And as I mentioned last time, I also wanted to create a FAQ page that will help you to migrate to a new Python version, and this is what I did here. And this tool features heavily on there, even though the first thing that is explained here is how to actually just flash a new OctoPy image after creating a backup and restoring from the backup and getting things running under a newer Python version that way, because that is frankly the easiest approach. Especially under OctoPy 018, which is, I think, a Debian Buster. I'm not 100% sure, at least like it's a bit old. You could, in theory, run a dist upgrade, but the Raspberry Pi Foundation officially does not recommend to do that. I tried it, it worked for me, but your mileage may vary. And then you could just use that to dist upgrade the OS, and then use the venv tool to recreate the virtual environment with the new Python version that comes with this upgrade, and then you would be golden. But also for your run-of-the-mill manual install on Windows or with OctoPrint deploy or whatever, you can just use this venv tool anywhere there is a Python virtual environment with OctoPrint installed in it, and things should work. The only caveat is that the virtual environment tool itself requires Python 3.7 at a minimum, which is end of life already, so I think this should not be that big of a problem to achieve. Yeah. Okay, so that was that. I hope this tool will come in handy for plenty of you. Yeah, what else did I do? So you might also have noticed that there were 2 file check releases recently. The version that I pushed out on November the 4th, November the 5th, November the 4th. I created it on November the 4th, and I think I even pushed it out on November the 4th. That fixed some minor bugs that I had noticed since the last release in March, and I was very happy to finally iron those out, only to then discover that some of my tests in the CI were failing due to some errors suddenly being logged in OctoPrint logs. So I introduced a funny race condition with these bug fixes, and this is what I patched with the 2024.11.12 release of the file check plugin. So funnily enough, this was a bug or a race condition that I introduced there that did not have any kind of effect for all of you as the users, but which wreaked absolute havoc with my automated testing. So this is something that I had to do quite fast, and sometimes things like that happen. But it had a funny side effect, and this is actually the next thing that I did is so OctoPrint has a whole bunch of end-to-end tests. They are implemented using something called Playwright, which is a framework for implementing browser-based end-to-end testing. And they are basically some automated testing that looks if the login mask in OctoPrint works, if logging in works, if wrong passwords are properly recognized, and which then logs into OctoPrint, tries to connect to the virtual printer, tries to print something, tries to upload something to print, opens the settings, closes the settings, stuff like that. So basically a rough smoke test to see if the UI in principle works. It also checks that no errors are logged in both the server log and the JavaScript error console. And that is something that runs or has been running in OctoPrint now for years on every single commit that I push, and also for every single release against multiple Python versions and such. And so this end-to-end test is part of OctoPrint sources. And now with this file check situation, this end-to-end test was precisely what was failing, and thus I wanted to be able to run it with the file check plugin in the file check repository itself. And so what I now did is I extracted this whole end-to-end test CI step into its own custom GitHub action that you can run. You tell it what OctoPrint version or tag or branch or whatever to use, and it will use the end-to-end tests that are inside of that source tree. And you also tell it what Python version to use and such. And then it will do all of this, set up all of the end-to-end test stuff, set up Playwright, install all the dependencies of Playwright, and run through all of these tests, and also check if there are errors in the OctoPrint log or not. And that is something that I think is also helpful for third-party plugins out there. I certainly will push this into all of mine, because it also allows you to create a test matrix for testing your plugin in OctoPrint of various versions. So my idea, this is actually something that I did for the FileCheck plugin now. The FileCheck plugin now, on every single push, every release, every pull request, is tested against both the current stable OctoPrint version as well as the development branch, the maintenance branch. So if something that I did in the plugin breaks against any of these versions, I will now get an immediate build failure. And I will also see if there's any kind of race condition or something like that during regular actual use that I miss during my development tests. And yeah, so I still have to document all of this properly, but this is something that I can only encourage plugin developers to also use to make sure that their plugins are working like they should with various OctoPrint versions. Yeah. And also maybe various Python versions. Yeah. Okay, and another thing that I actually ran into was a Firefox bug. So while doing all of the above, like 110.3 and 111.0 work and the FileCheck stuff and everything else, I managed over the past 1.5 months to trigger a specific and very weird error twice. So I was doing something, I was debugging something, and all of a sudden OctoPrint refused to work. I was getting weird CSRF failures and couldn't log in anymore. Clearing the cookies in the Firefox development tooling didn't work, didn't solve it. Looking into the network tab, I saw that for some reason some of the cookies were duplicated, like both the session cookie and the CSRF token were being just sent twice in every single request. And apparently that was also the reason for my CSRF check failures, because the backend was looking at one cookie and the front end was expecting another. And yeah, so weird stuff was happening. And I first thought that I had broken something, because that happened right after I had done some quite heavy refactoring in the maintenance branch. But then it happened again like a week ago, when I did not touch anything bigger at that specific point, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I'm not entirely sure. But anyway, it started. It got me thinking. And I then noticed that it had happened when I had viewed the source of the page, because I wanted to check if I had still some now escaped HTML in there after the auto escape changes. And that was when this weird second set of cookies got added to the requests. And took me some while to figure out how to delete them again, which only worked through the Firefox privacy settings, not through the development tooling. Then I first thought that maybe it was something that was broken in my browser profile, and a fresh profile didn't allow me to reproduce things anymore. But then I did the check in the settings and figured out that a specific setting in Firefox would trigger it even in a fresh profile. And that was the point where I came to the conclusion, okay, apparently this is actually a browser bug. So I reported it to Mozilla after checking that it wasn't already reported. And I even had some minimal server code with which to reproduce that, because I had to figure out what if I had broken something or them. And the best way to do that was to create a minimal example with which to reproduce things, and then rule out my code, my profile, my settings, and everything, so that I could be sure it really is the browser. And then I reported it, and as of, I think, yesterday, they actually fixed it. And as far as I understand, the fix is slated for release with Firefox 1.3.4. So, yay, my first browser bug. And it actually was a proper one, and it is getting fixed. So, yeah, but that was some research that went into that, because, as I said, I first thought I had broken something in OctoPrint, and broken in a way that would have caused absolute havoc with all of you. So I'm quite glad it turned out to be a browser issue for once. But yeah. Okay, so in the part of everything that I just mentioned, what I also did was, fixed the one or other bug and merged the one or other PR, but you probably already knew that. Okay, so that was everything that I did. And I probably forgot something even, but that was like the most important stuff that I did. What are the next steps? So it is now mid-November. My major focus for the rest of the year basically will be to get 1.11.0 as far towards a first release candidate as I can. Ideally, I would like to push out the first release candidate before Christmas. I sadly have not yet had a chance, because all of the above, to look into the this custom control manager plugin that I mentioned last time, that I wanted to basically convert from the existing one into a bundled one. I might still be able to do that, or maybe I'll have to postpone that to 1.12.0. We will see. But most of the other tasks for 1.11 are now out of the way. There's still some minor bug fixes and minor requests that still need to be implemented, but all in all, it's okay. So that will basically be my sole planned focus for the rest of 2024. And let's see if I can't still push out a first release candidate this year. That would be amazing. You might remember that last time I said that one of my next steps would also be to try to figure out if there is some way to still add one more health check to the new health check plugin that would tell you if it is running on an SD card, on a Raspberry Pi, basically with an SD card for its file system, if this SD card is starting to die and deteriorating and such. I looked into that, did a bunch of research. Sadly, there is simply no way to do that reliably. The only options that would figure it out reliably are completely destructive. So they basically just write stuff on the card, on the whole card, and figure out whether it is still writable and usable that way. But of course, after that, the card needs to be reformatted because it's unusable. So that is not an option, and there is simply no health parameters or something like that I could read out. Sadly, they did not implement anything like this. So for now, at least, with the current options, no health check for SD card health can be added. Too bad, would have been a nice thing to have, but yeah, won't work out, sadly. And so that is basically it. We will have, at least that's the plan, we will have one more of these this year in December. And since that will basically be our holidays episode, I will, of course, also make sure to wear my Santa hat as every year. And it also will be, in a way, OctoPrint's birthday episode, because OctoPrint, as you might know, was created on December 25th, 2012. So every year in December, I not only try to do a little look back, a little review of the year, but also in a way celebrate its birthday. And so we will do that. And of course, I will announce that, I will push this out on Patreon and GitHub sponsors a bit earlier before I publish it for everyone. So if you want to see it as early as possible, then please support my work on Patreon or GitHub sponsors and make sure to select the right level. And yeah, so I think that is pretty much all that I wanted to tell you today. Thank you for being here. I hope it was interesting, even though it was a bit quite techy today with all of the tooling and stuff, but still. And I hope you're still healthy and yeah, happy printing and everything. Bye.